My name is Margaret Chen, and at 73 years old, I never imagined I'd be signing over my entire inheritance to my housekeeper while my own daughter watched in horror. The moment I handed Rosa that envelope containing the deed to my house and access to my savings, Victoria's face went from smug superiority to complete shock. She actually gasped when she realized the woman she'd treated like dirt for years was now wealthier than she'd ever be. But to understand why I gave everything to the woman who cleaned my floors instead of my own flesh and blood, you need to hear what Victoria said to me that changed everything. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the family we choose deserves more than the family we're born with. Before I continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and hit that like button if you've ever been told you don't deserve something by someone who should have loved you unconditionally. You know, at my age, I've learned that respect isn't automatic, even from your own children. I spent decades building a comfortable life, not just for myself, but for my daughter Victoria. Every sacrifice I made, every late night I worked at the hospital as a nurse, every vacation I skipped to save money, it was all for her future. But sometimes, the children we pour everything into grow up feeling entitled to what we've earned, forgetting that nothing in life is guaranteed. What hurts most isn't the loss of the relationship I thought we'd have. It's realizing that my daughter saw me not as her mother who sacrificed everything, but as an obstacle to her inheritance. The woman who raised her, who stayed up during her fevers, who worked double shifts to pay for her private school. That woman apparently didn't deserve to enjoy the fruits of her labor. But this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about finding family in unexpected places, about recognizing true kindness when you see it, and about making sure your legacy goes to someone who actually values it. So settle in, because what I'm about to tell you will make you rethink everything about family, inheritance, and what we truly owe our children. Life wasn't always complicated between Victoria and me. In fact, there was a time when we were incredibly close. After my husband Daniel passed away from cancer 15 years ago, it was just the two of us against the world. Victoria was 31 then, already married to her husband Craig, but she'd come by every Sunday for lunch. We'd cook together, laugh about old memories, and she'd tell me about her work as a marketing executive. I lived in the same 4-bedroom colonial house in Riverside, Connecticut, that Daniel and I had bought 35 years ago. It wasn't a mansion, but it was beautiful, white with green shutters, a wraparound porch, and gardens I tended myself until my arthritis got too bad. The house was worth quite a bit now, especially with how the neighborhood had developed. Along with my savings and Daniel's life insurance payout that I'd invested wisely, I was what you'd call comfortable. Not wealthy, but certainly secure. Rosa Martinez came into my life 8 years ago. I'd placed an ad for a part-time housekeeper after my doctor insisted I needed help with the heavier household tasks. Rosa was the third person I interviewed, and I hired her on the spot. There was something genuine about her. The way she listened when I talked, how she handled my china with such care, and her warm smile that reached her eyes. What started as twice-weekly cleaning sessions evolved into something more. Rosa would stay for coffee after finishing her work, and we'd chat about everything: her 3 children she was putting through school, her husband Carlos who worked construction, her dreams of maybe opening a small restaurant someday. She never complained, even though I knew money was tight for her family. Victoria seemed fine with Rosa at first. She'd even commented on how clean the house looked and how it was good I had help. But as the years passed, and Rosa became more than just hired help, more like a friend, I noticed Victoria's attitude shifting. She'd make little comments about the help getting too comfortable, or questioning why Rosa was still there chatting after I'd paid her. Looking back, I can see the signs were there. The way Victoria's visits became less frequent, more transactional. She'd breeze in, ask about my finances, remind me about her children's private school tuition, and leave with a check. But I kept making excuses for her. She was busy. She was stressed. She was still my daughter after all. The shift in Victoria's behavior didn't happen overnight. It crept in like fog, slowly obscuring the daughter I once knew. It started with small things. She'd call less frequently, and when she did, the conversations always steered toward money. "Mom, the kids need new computers for school." "Mom, Craig's business is having a slow quarter." "Mom, we're thinking of renovating the kitchen." I never minded helping. That's what parents do, right? But what bothered me was how these requests came without any real interest in my life. She'd barely ask how I was feeling, never noticed when I'd gotten my hair done, and definitely didn't care about my volunteer work at the local library or my book club meetings. Meanwhile, Rosa noticed everything. She'd comment on my new sweater, ask about the book I was reading, and remember every story I told her about my youth in San Francisco. When I mentioned my knee was bothering me, she'd show up the next day with her homemade liniment that her grandmother taught her to make. When I was sad on Daniel's birthday, she'd bring me fresh flowers from her garden. The contrast became stark during holidays. Victoria would host elaborate Thanksgiving dinners, and I'd arrive with my contributions, always the pies she requested, made from scratch despite my aching hands. But I felt like a guest, not the matriarch of the family. She'd seat me at the far end of the table, away from the main conversations. My grandchildren, Tyler and Emma, barely knew me, because Victoria never encouraged a relationship between us. One Thanksgiving, I overheard Victoria talking to her sister-in-law in the kitchen. "I can't wait until Mom downsizes. That house is too big for her anyway, and the equity could really help us out." They didn't know I was standing in the doorway. I left early that day, claiming I was tired, but really I just couldn't bear to stay. Rosa, on the other hand, invited me to her family gatherings. I always declined, not wanting to impose, but she'd bring me plates of homemade tamales and share videos of her children dancing. Her daughter Maria was studying to be a nurse, inspired, Rosa said, by my stories from the hospital. Her twin boys were in community college, working part-time to help with expenses. The final straw in this growing imbalance came when I had a minor fall in the garden. Nothing serious, just a twisted ankle, but Rosa found me and immediately called for help, stayed with me at the emergency room, and then insisted on checking on me daily until I healed. "Victoria?" She sent a text. "Heard you fell. Maybe it's time to think about assisted living?" Not even a phone call. The day everything changed was a Tuesday in March, 6 months ago. I remember because it was unusually warm for early spring, and I'd asked Victoria to come help me sort through some of Daniel's old things in the attic. I was finally ready to let go of some items, and I thought it would be nice to do it together, maybe share some memories. Victoria arrived an hour late, clearly irritated. "Mom, I had to cancel a spa appointment for this," she said, not even trying to hide her annoyance. "Can't Rosa help you with this stuff?" That's what you pay her for. "Rosa's visiting her sick mother today," I explained. "Besides, I thought you might want to look through Dad's things. There might be something you'd like to keep." She rolled her eyes and followed me to the attic. As we sorted through boxes, I pulled out Daniel's watch, a beautiful vintage Omega he'd inherited from his father. "I was thinking Tyler might like this when he graduates," I said, holding it up to the light. Victoria snatched it from my hands. "Actually, I'll take that now. It's worth at least $5,000. I already had it appraised online." That stung, but what came next was worse. As I reached for another box, I knocked over a stack of photo albums. Pictures scattered everywhere. Our family vacations, Victoria's graduation, her wedding. I bent down to collect them, moving slowly because of my arthritis. "God, Mom, you're so clumsy," Victoria snapped. "No wonder you fell in the garden. You really need to face facts. You're getting too old for this house." "I'm managing just fine," I said quietly, still gathering photos. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you're just a lonely old woman clinging to a house that's too big, stuff that's too dusty, and memories of a life that's over. She paused, and her next words cut through me like a knife. Look at you, Mom. You go to your little book clubs, wear your old-fashioned clothes, and pretend you're still relevant. But honestly, you don't deserve nice things anymore. You should be downsizing, moving somewhere smaller, and giving us the inheritance now when we actually need it. I froze, a photo of Victoria's 5th birthday party in my hand. Her smiling face covered in chocolate cake, my arms around her. You don't deserve nice things, she repeated, each word deliberate. At your age, what's the point? You should be thinking about our future, not hoarding wealth you can't even enjoy. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking not from age but from shock. Get out, I whispered. What? Get out of my house. Now. Victoria laughed. Oh, come on, Mom. Don't be so dramatic. I'm just being honest. Someone needs to talk sense into you. But I was done. 73 years of life had taught me to recognize cruelty when I heard it, even when it came wrapped in family ties. She left, slamming the door, and I knew something fundamental had broken between us. After Victoria left, I sat in my living room until well past dark. The photo albums lay scattered on the coffee table where I dropped them, a messy timeline of a life I suddenly saw differently. Every picture of Victoria's birthday parties, graduations, and celebrations. Had I been blind to who she really was all along? The house felt oppressively quiet. The grandfather clock Daniel bought for our anniversary ticked loudly in the hallway, counting out seconds of my new reality. My own daughter saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to her inheritance. The words echoed, "You don't deserve nice things." I didn't sleep that night, or the next. By the third day, I hadn't eaten anything substantial, surviving on tea and crackers. The phone rang several times, Victoria's number flashing on the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. What was there to say? She'd made her feelings crystal clear. My neighbor Janet knocked on the door when she noticed my mail piling up. I told her I had the flu and sent her away. The last thing I wanted was pity, or people knowing that my own daughter had essentially told me I was worthless, just waiting to die so she could claim her prize. Depression isn't new to me. I'd wrestled with it after Daniel died, but this was different. This was grief for someone still living. Mourning the daughter I thought I'd raised, the relationship I thought we'd had. I found myself questioning every moment. Had she been pretending to love me all these years? When did I become nothing more than a walking inheritance to her? I started making lists of all the nice things I apparently didn't deserve. My mother's pearl necklace that I still wore to church. The rose bushes I'd planted with Daniel. My collection of first edition books. The very house that held 40 years of memories. According to Victoria, these were all wasted on me. By the end of the week, I'd convinced myself she was right. What was I holding on to it all for? I was just one fall away from a nursing home, one illness away from being unable to care for myself. Maybe it would be easier to just give her everything now and disappear into some small apartment where I could fade away without bothering anyone. I even called a real estate agent, her cheerful voice asking about the property. But when she asked why I was selling, I couldn't answer. I hung up and cried for the first time since Victoria's visit. Not pretty tears, the ugly body-shaking sobs of someone who'd lost their purpose. How had I raised someone so cruel? Where had I gone wrong? Or had Victoria always been this way, and I'd just been too blind to see it? The following Monday morning, Rosa arrived for her regular cleaning day. She let herself in with her key as usual and found me still in my bathrobe at noon, something unheard of for me. The house was a mess. Dishes in the sink, mail scattered on the floor, dust settling on surfaces I usually kept spotless. "Senora Margaret," she exclaimed, dropping her purse and rushing to my side. "What happened? Are you sick?" I tried to brush her off, claim I was just tired, but Rosa had known me too long. She made me tea, proper tea, not the lukewarm cups I'd been making myself, and sat across from me at the kitchen table, waiting. She didn't start cleaning, didn't mention the messy house, just sat there with patient concern. Maybe it was her patient silence, or the familiar comfort of her presence, but I found myself telling her everything. Victoria's words, the cruelty in her voice, the way she'd grabbed at her father's watch like a vulture. Rosa listened without interrupting, her face cycling through expressions of disbelief, sadness, and finally, quiet anger. "She is wrong," Rosa said simply when I finished. "So very wrong." "But what if she's not?" I asked. "What if I am just a foolish old woman holding on to things that should go to younger people who can enjoy them?" Rosa stood up abruptly and walked to the window. "You know what I see when I look at you, Senora? I see a woman who reads 3 books a week because her mind is hungry. I see someone who grows the most beautiful roses in the neighborhood because beauty matters to her. I see a person who volunteers teaching adults to read because she believes everyone deserves education." She turned back to me, her eyes fierce. "I see a woman who helped me understand tax forms when I first started working here, who wrote a recommendation letter for Maria's nursing school, who never made me feel less than human even though I clean houses for a living. You deserve every nice thing in this world and more." Her words broke something loose in me. I started crying again, but these were different tears, cleaner somehow. "You know what?" I said, wiping my eyes. "You're right. I do deserve nice things. I worked for them, I earned them, and I'll be damned if I'll let anyone, even my own daughter, make me feel otherwise." Rosa smiled. "There's the Senora I know." That afternoon, we cleaned the house together, even though I insisted it wasn't her job. As we worked, a plan began forming in my mind. If Victoria thought I didn't deserve my own possessions, then perhaps she didn't deserve to inherit them. The thought was shocking at first. Disinherit my own daughter? But the more I considered it, the more right it felt. I had a choice to make: continue being the victim of my daughter's greed and cruelty, or take control of my legacy and ensure it went to someone who truly valued not just my possessions, but me. Making the decision to change my will was one thing. Actually doing it was another. The emotional weight of disinheriting my only child felt like carrying stones in my chest. I spent weeks second-guessing myself, starting letters to my lawyer only to tear them up. Victoria continued calling, leaving voicemails that alternated between false sweetness and irritation. "Mom, you're being childish." "Mom, I was just stressed that day." "Mom, we need to discuss your financial planning." Never once did she actually apologize or acknowledge the hurt she'd caused. The word sorry never crossed her lips. I started paying closer attention to how she'd trained me over the years. Every conversation was a transaction. Every visit had an agenda. Even her children, my grandchildren, had been taught to see me as Grandma with the money, rather than just Grandma. When was the last time Tyler or Emma had hugged me without being prompted? When had they ever asked about my life, my stories, my dreams? Meanwhile, Rosa continued being herself, genuine, caring, hardworking. But now I noticed more. How she'd take extra care with my favorite teacup. How she'd arrange the flowers just the way I liked them. How she'd pause in her work when I seemed sad, offering silent companionship. She never asked for anything extra, never hinted at needing more money despite her family's struggles. I learned more about her situation too. Her husband, Carlos, had been diagnosed with diabetes and had to cut back his hours. Maria's nursing school was expensive, even with scholarships. The twins needed a car to share for their commutes to college and work. Yet Rosa never complained, never looked at my things with the calculating gaze I'd grown accustomed to from Victoria. The hardest part was dealing with the guilt. Mothers aren't supposed to choose strangers over their children. Every parenting book, every social expectation, every voice in my head screamed that I was being vindictive, petty, wrong. I even went to speak with Reverend Patterson at my church, dancing around the specifics, but seeking guidance. "Margaret," he said gently, "sometimes the greatest love we can show our children is allowing them to experience the consequences of their choices. And sometimes, family is about more than blood." I started documenting everything, not out of spite, but for clarity. I wrote down every interaction with Victoria, every kindness from Rosa. The contrast was undeniable. One saw me as an ATM approaching expiration. The other saw me as a person worthy of respect and genuine affection. 3 months after that horrible day in the attic, I finally made an appointment with my lawyer, Robert Steinberg. I'd known Robert for 20 years. He'd handled Daniel's estate, and I trusted him completely. Still, my hands shook as I explained what I wanted to do. "I need to make some changes to my will," I said, then took a deep breath. "Significant changes. I want to leave everything to Rosa Martinez," I told Robert, the words feeling surreal even as I spoke them. "The house, the investments, all of it. Everything except small educational trusts for my grandchildren." Robert didn't judge. He asked careful questions about my mental state, about whether I was being coerced. When I explained the situation with Victoria, he nodded slowly. "It's your estate, Margaret. You have every right to distribute it as you see fit. However, I need to make sure you understand. This is what we'll do upon your passing. You can't simply hand over your assets while you're alive without significant tax implications." "I understand," I said, "but I want to make sure it's ironclad. And I want to tell Rosa about it. She deserves to know that her kindness hasn't gone unnoticed." We spent hours going over the details. I set aside $25,000 for each grandchild's education, accessible only when they turned 25. It wasn't much compared to the whole estate, but it was something. They were victims of their mother's values, not the architect's. As we finalized the paperwork, I felt a weight lifting. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about ensuring that someone who saw my worth would benefit from what I'd built. I also started changing how I lived. If I deserved nice things, then I would enjoy them. I bought new clothes, not fancy, but quality items that made me feel good. I booked a cruise to Alaska, something Daniel and I had always planned but never done. I hired a landscaper to help Rosa with the gardens, so she wouldn't have to do the heavy work. Rosa noticed the changes. "You seem happier, Señora," she commented one day, finding me reading on the porch in a new sundress. "I am happier," I admitted. "I've remembered something important, that my life isn't over yet." I also began including Rosa in more of my life. I invited her to stay for lunch after work, introduced her to my book club friends, and even attended Maria's nursing school graduation. The joy on Rosa's face when I showed up with flowers was worth more than any gratitude Victoria had shown me in years. Victoria, meanwhile, grew increasingly frustrated with my independence. She'd drop by unannounced, finding me gone to lunch with friends or returning from shopping. "Since when do you go out so much?" she demanded one day. "Since I remembered I'm still alive," I replied calmly. Her face darkened. "This is about what I said, isn't it?" "Mom, I was just being practical." "No, Victoria. You were being cruel, and I'm grateful for your honesty. It clarified a lot of things for me." The look of unease that crossed her face was telling. She sensed a shift in power but couldn't quite identify it. I wasn't ready to reveal my plans yet, but I was building towards something. The woman who'd once cowered at her daughter's dismissal was growing stronger every day. As autumn arrived, I had transformed into someone I hadn't been in years, perhaps ever. The Margaret who emerged from the crucible of Victoria's cruelty was stronger, clearer, and more authentic than the one who'd entered it. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. My relationship with Rosa had evolved beyond employer and employee into genuine friendship. She'd bring her lunch and we'd eat together in the garden, sharing stories of our youth. I taught her about investing, showing her how to read financial statements and understand compound interest. She taught me her grandmother's recipes and Spanish phrases that made us both laugh at my pronunciation. One day, Rosa confided that she'd been saving for years to open a small restaurant. "It's a silly dream," she said, embarrassed. "But I make the best mole in Connecticut. Everyone says so." "Dreams aren't silly at any age," I told her. "What would you need to get started?" We spent the afternoon creating a business plan on my laptop. Rosa had clearly thought this through. She knew her startup costs, had identified a location, even had a menu planned. All she lacked was capital and confidence. "You know what you need?" I said. "A test run. Why don't you cater my book club's Christmas party? I'll pay you properly, and you can see how it goes." The hope in her eyes was beautiful. Victoria, sensing my growing independence, shifted tactics. She started love-bombing me, sending flowers, calling with fake concern, even suggesting we take a spa weekend together. But I'd learned to see through manipulation. "That's kind of you," I'd say to each offer, "but I'm quite busy." The Christmas party was a revelation. Rosa, with her daughter Maria's help, created a fusion menu that had my book club friends raving. Several booked her for their own events on the spot. Watching Rosa bloom with confidence, seeing her realize that her dreams were valid and achievable, filled me with more maternal pride than I'd felt at any of Victoria's hollow achievements. This was what it meant to nurture someone, to see their potential and help them reach it, not because of what they could give you, but because their success was its own reward. I also reconnected with Tyler and Emma, my grandchildren, inviting them to lunch individually without their mother. Away from Victoria's influence, they were different, curious, kind, even affectionate. Tyler, now 18, confided he was interested in becoming a teacher, but his mother thought it was beneath him. Emma, 16, showed me her poetry, beautiful words she'd been told were a waste of time. "Follow your hearts," I told them both. "Life's too short to live someone else's dreams." By January, I knew it was time. I had the new will. Rosa knew she was my beneficiary, and I was ready for whatever came next. I just needed the right moment to make it known. That moment, as it turned out, would come from Victoria herself. The stage for the revelation was set, ironically, by Victoria herself. She announced in January that she was throwing me a surprise 74th birthday party. The emphasis on surprise felt ominous. I suspected this was less about celebrating me and more about performing the role of devoted daughter for our extended family and friends. "I don't want a big party," I told her when she accidentally let it slip. "Nonsense, Mom. You only turned 74 once. Besides, everyone wants to celebrate you." What she meant was, everyone would see her being the perfect daughter and perhaps pressure me to be more reasonable about my assets. I decided not to fight it. In fact, I saw an opportunity. I called Robert and asked him to prepare a letter explaining my decision, something I could share when the moment felt right. I also made one specific request. I wanted Rosa and her family invited to the party as my special guests, not as help. Victoria balked at this. Mom, it's going to be elegant. Do they even have appropriate clothes? They'll be there as my guests, I said firmly. Or I won't attend at all. The party was held at the country club. Victoria's choice, not mine. She'd invited 50 people, including relatives I hadn't seen in years, her society friends, and notably, several real estate agents and financial advisors. The agenda was transparent. I arrived in a new dress, silk, elegant, in a deep purple that made me feel regal. Rosa and her family were already there, looking slightly uncomfortable but dressed beautifully. I made a beeline for them, linking arms with Rosa and introducing her to everyone as my dear friend. Victoria's speech after dinner was a masterpiece of false sentiment. She spoke about sacrifice, family values, and the importance of taking care of our elders. Several people wiped away tears. I kept my expression neutral, even as my stomach churned. Then she made her mistake. As Mom enters this new phase of life, Victoria announced, Craig and I want to make sure she's taken care of. We found a lovely senior community where she'll be safe and comfortable, allowing us to manage the family assets responsibly. The room went silent. This wasn't a birthday speech. It was a coup attempt. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. How thoughtful, Victoria. But I have an announcement of my own. I reached into my purse and pulled out the letter from Robert. Since we're discussing my future, I thought everyone should know I've recently updated my will. Victoria's smile became fixed. Rosa, I said, turning to my friend, would you please come here? As Rosa approached, confused but trusting, I handed her the envelope. This is for you. It explains everything. I want everyone here to witness that I'm of sound mind and making this choice freely. Mom, Victoria's voice was sharp. What are you doing? I looked at my daughter, then at the room full of people. I'm ensuring my legacy goes to someone who sees me as a person, not a problem to be solved. Someone who has shown me genuine love and respect, not calculated interest. The letter would explain the details later, but the message was clear. I had chosen my true family. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Victoria's face went from confused to horrified as the implications sank in. You can't be serious, she hissed, abandoning all pretense of the devoted daughter. You're giving everything to the maid? I'm giving everything to my friend, I corrected calmly. The woman who's shown me more genuine care in 8 years than you have in the last 20. Craig jumped up, his face red. This is elder abuse. She's clearly manipulated you. We'll contest this. Sit down, Craig, I said with steel in my voice. The only manipulation I've experienced is from people who saw me as a bank account with a pulse. Everything is legal and documented. Upon my passing, Rosa will inherit my estate. Until then, I'll be enjoying my life and my possessions, because I deserve nice things. Rosa stood frozen, the envelope in her trembling hands. Senora, I don't understand. Read the letter when you get home, I said gently. It explains everything. You've given me more than you know, Rosa. This is my way of saying thank you. Victoria grabbed my arm. Mom, let's discuss this privately. You're embarrassing yourself. I gently but firmly removed her hand. No, Victoria, I'm done being silent. You told me I don't deserve nice things. You made it clear that my only value was what you could inherit. Well, I've decided someone who values me as a person deserves those nice things instead. The relatives were whispering among themselves. Aunt Patricia, Daniel's sister, spoke up. Margaret, surely this is hasty. Victoria is your daughter. Yes, I agreed. She is. And for years I excused her treatment because of that fact. but being family doesn't give anyone the right to be cruel. I turned to address the room. I've made my decision with full mental capacity and careful consideration. My lawyer has everything documented. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to leave this party that was never really for me anyway. As I walked toward the exit, I heard Victoria's voice, high and desperate. "You'll regret this. I'll contest the will. You can't just abandon your family for hired help." I turned back one final time. "I'm not abandoning family, Victoria. I'm acknowledging that family isn't just about blood. It's about love, respect, and seeing someone's worth beyond their bank balance." Rosa and her family followed me out, Rosa still clutching the envelope. In the parking lot, she finally spoke. "Señora, this is too much. I cannot accept." "You can and you will," I said, "when the time comes. For now, just know that your kindness, your friendship, your genuine care, it all mattered. It all counted." The next days were a whirlwind. Victoria called repeatedly, cycling between threats, tears, and promises to change. I didn't answer. She showed up at my door. I didn't let her in. She sent Tyler and Emma with messages. I told them I loved them, but wouldn't discuss it. Robert called to confirm that everything was legally sound. "She can threaten all she wants, but she has no case. The will is ironclad."